Happy holidays to all. This will be my last podcast of the year before the holiday break here on Tuesday Tales. And I'll be making more stories over the Christmas break, as I'm sure you will with your families. Life is full of stories. That is what makes you unique in your business. Those experiences and those values are the sum of you. I'm Helen Harwood Snell. I'm an expert storyteller and a certified communication coach. And I love you to show you how to embrace your stories, to be seen, to create trust, and to close more sales. And one of the ways I do that is by inviting fabulous guests to join me on Tuesday Tales, where we talk about their messaging, their business, and then we build a story together for them at the end of the podcast. So today I would love to welcome Steve Cohen. Steve is a healthcare professional and a speaker whose journey is an interesting one. He began without a home himself, and so going through stress has brought him into the business that he now runs, which is running a whole person performance and wellness brand that blends healthcare, hypnosis, and keynote speaking to help people and organizations reduce their stress, prevent burnout, and perform at higher levels, especially under high pressure environments like we see in healthcare. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here. So let's start with a bit of the fun stuff. What do you do when you are not working?
When I'm not working,
What do you do for fun?
I like taking people's lives and the things that they tell me, and I actually like to rewrite their lives into lyric, and then I like to write their lyrics into songs about their lives. That to me is fun. The second thing I do a lot of is running, which is another story in itself that occurred even from when I was a child. Actually, both of those started when I was a child.
Wow, that's amazing. Songwriting is not a talent for the faint of heart. Now, do you do that? Do you gift songs to people?
In one of my practices that I have, when people come in and they tell me a little bit about their lives, I actually record every single word they say. I record what they say, and I listen to what they say, and I give them the song back in their words,
Oh,
so they can
wow.
identify. Because I think that's most important when somebody talks to you, they can talk to you in your words, or they can talk to you, or you can talk to them in their words. And I think it's better when you talk in your own words, because who do you listen to most of the time? Do you listen to others, or do you listen to yourself? And your journey is because you've listened to yourself.
Yeah, fantastic. And so you do some running as well. So obviously, fitness and health are a big part of your story. Tell me, share with the audience a couple of your core values in life.
My core values is health and longevity. Those are my core values. I had my father was quite a large man. He was probably about 350 pounds, and he was about 6 feet tall. And unfortunately, I lost my father years ago, and I really felt that health would have helped him with longevity. So those are my core values: is to really focus on being healthy, and focus on not only being healthy but living longer, being healthy.
Yes. Yeah, I remember reading somewhere, I don't know how many years ago, somebody said something about, oh my goodness, why would you ever want to live to be 100? Because you're going to be so frail and so sick, but you don't have to be, right? Dick Van Dyke just turned 100 this week, and he's still super healthy, like still walking around doing all the things. My own father is 93 years old, and he is healthy as they come. So yeah, that's fantastic. I think tying that piece together, there's no sense in living long if you're also not healthy with that, right?
Right.
And
When I was a child, I went to my friend and I used to always get up Sunday mornings, and we would go out and do something. The only problem is he never got up Sunday mornings, but I did. And so I would end up talking with his mother, who was probably at that time in her 40s. And somehow we got on the conversation of how long we wanted to live. And I said, oh, I think maybe 108. And she goes, 108. She goes, I'd be happy to reach 65, because 65, you know what, there's not much happens after 65. And I thought to myself, boy, I have so much to do. I don't think I can do it all in, by the time I'm 65.
Wow, I love that you knew that at such an early age as well, that you wanted to live. What did you say? 108?
108. Now I actually upped it a little bit. Now that Dick Van Dyke's around, he kind of spoiled it.
Hey, there's room for lots of people at the
That's right.
top. That's awesome. So, tell me in this this kind of journey that you've been on through your life. We're going to get into that a little bit more, but who would you identify as a hero or somebody who really influenced this path that you actually took?
My hero actually was an instructor of mine when I was in college.
Hmm.
We used to call her Sarge, and that's what she went by. I didn't realize that she actually was a sergeant in the 1940s in the Army, and she always wanted, whenever she was teaching us, to do healthcare. This is a time where nurses were still doing, making beds and doing such, and she wanted everything perfect. And I remember one time talking to her, telling her, and I have to be honest with you, I can't do things perfect. I'm just unable to do it. And she's like, I don't want you to be perfect. I tell you to be perfect because I want you to be able to make one mistake so you can be close to perfect. So she was my hero, and she pushed me. I went through childhood stuff I talked with her about, and she pushed me to go forward and reinvent, and then after that, reinvent.
Incredible, incredible. So pushed you to work hard, um, striving for perfection, but knowing that you were never going to quite get there.
Right.
And that's, excuse me, if I may say, that's a great way to think about health because we are all going to have things that happen to us in our lives that affect our health, but if we try our best to be our best, it's going to help us recover quicker, or perhaps not fall into a fate that we could otherwise avoid. So it seems like a good lesson that you have taken from that. And was
Yeah.
that instructor training in college? Was that in your nursing training, Steve?
Yeah, that was in my nursing training. I actually thought that I could never get through the training, and fortunately, I was able to. The other thing that I did is I bought her a rose, said, please, please pass me. And I gave her a rose. And she actually sent me a card in the mail that said, I just want to tell you, anybody who sends me a rose passes.
Oh, good deal. Okay. Now I have to ask you because I know very little about the healthcare profession, but I have heard the same message over and over and over again that nurses work a lot harder than doctors and probably know a lot more than doctors because of all of the day-to-day work that they're doing with patients. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah, I do agree with that. One of the things that's really important is, nurses get to see people one on one. They get to spend a little bit more time. I think a lot of physicians do not have the time to spend with the patient. So we get to see the
Hmm.
patient. Sometimes you get to see the same thing, at least for myself, I get to see the same things in some patients time after time. So I can utilize what I learned from one patient actually to use and help another patient. But the hours are sometimes immense, just really immense.
Yeah. Now, so tell me a little bit more about that then. From your profession in nursing, you have kind of come to a place you still practice nursing,
Right.
but you also work with people in the nursing profession to help them with the burnout and the stress that comes with that. So tell us a bit about that story. How did you come into that work?
Well, I came into it only because I first started with patients themselves. And I started noticing, I really thought that they could make strides that the healthcare world or the medical world thought they couldn't. And I knew that if they just took one step to make a change, they could do better. And then I actually was working with a nurse one time, not counseling her, just working alongside her, and made mention of one thing that she could possibly do to make a change. And I just let it go. And probably about 2 weeks later, she told me, she goes, I did that one thing and I cannot believe what a change it made. So making one change in one patient, and then second patient, then the third patient, then finally passing along to a healthcare professional really made a change, made a difference.
That's incredible. I'm finding it a little ironic that here we are talking about health and I'm getting over a cold, so I'm coughing a little bit. So I keep putting myself on mute so that you're not hearing the cough. Um, it's it never fails. I've gone almost the whole day, and as soon as we get on a call now, I'm coughing again. So I'm drinking my water and I'm muting myself when I have to.
As long as you don't give me a computer virus, I'm fine.
I'll do my best not to. Um, and so tell me then a little bit more about that transition, um, working, understanding that you could make these small changes in people's lives. How did you then turn that into this kind of whole healing, um, business that you now find yourself in, talking to people about whole health and really helping people in the medical profession avoid that burnout and look after those little steps in their health? How did that all come together, Steve?
Well, Helen, it actually started with a story. Because one day as a healthcare professional, as a registered nurse, I don't see my patients anymore in the hospital. I see them all at home. And I was actually going to a patient's home, and I was not given a diagnosis for the patient. I was asked to go assess the patient, which I've never had ever had that request before. And I walked into the patient's home, and it turned out that the patient had prostate cancer, and he was treated, and he went into remission, which was good. The only problem that happened is while he was going through the chemotherapy and the radiation, they burnt his bowel. So
Ugh.
he was 80 years old, and they said, having this, treating this probably could give you, another 5, 10 years. That's what their thoughts were. Well, it turned out after they burnt his bowel, they sent him home and said, we got to tell you, you have about 3 or 4 months. Um, I didn't get that information from the healthcare. I got that actually from the patient. So the patient told me. So there may be a little bit different. So when I first saw the patient, he was up in a hospital bed, laying in bed. His wife was rolling him back and forth, changing diapers. He was just laying there, getting ready for his demise. And I went in just to do his assessment, and just so I could do that. And when I talked to him, I said, "Do you know there's a possibility that maybe you don't have 3 weeks left?" And he goes, "Oh, you think I'm not going to make it 2 weeks?" And I said, "No, no, no. I'm thinking you can go a lot farther." And I said, "First of all," I said, "think of this." I said, "Have you ever been on water?" And he goes, "Like what?" I said, "Like Michigan." He's like, "No." I said, "Have you ever been on water doing anything?" He goes, "I canoed on the Mississippi." I'm like, "Wow, I've never been canoed on the Mississippi." And then I just said to him, I said, "Take a moment real quick and think about on the Mississippi, and you're canoeing, and all of a sudden there's a little side trail that you decide to go in the river, and you follow that, and it turns out the water stops moving behind you, and you can't figure out why." And I said, as you paddle and paddle, moving closer and closer, you find out a tree has fallen across the branch, and that's why the water's not moving. So every time you go and you think, you know what, I haven't gone to the bathroom for 5 days, that's because there's a branch that's crossing that river that won't let anything through. I said, but when you finally have that explosive response, that's because there was enough water to push it through. And I said, so think of yourself as the river that's just being slowed down. And I said, but if you went and made one change, like if you went and rolled over yourself, or you went and decided to stand up, or you decided to do one thing that would make a change in the way your life comes to be. Well, needless to say, I had to discharge this man because there was nothing to do. Insurance requires you to find something wrong that you're treating someone for. But I wasn't treating because he started rolling his bed. He started standing up at the side of his bed. He started walking to the bathroom. And that kind of made that decision for me. You know what? If this man who is supposedly terminally ill can come to life, how can people who are not already having life even move further along?
Oh, I love that. And I love that whole story. Of course, I mean, you smiled when you knew you were going to tell me a story. Um, like when we think of our body, like I was picturing myself, like even if he just drank more water, like that
Right.
would maybe help to flush things through his system, right? So taking a story of something he could relate to and turning that into something useful for him, that like that's powerful for me because I love the power of a story. um, and so you also, part of your career is in speaking to healthcare teams, and do you take this same kind of message, Steve, into corporate worlds as well, or do you focus mostly on healthcare?
I take it to corporate because it's so important that the mental health and the physical health of employees are there because you want productivity in your business. And if you want productivity, you have to keep people at their optimal state. So when I talk healthcare, but I also talk why healthcare is important to keep
Right.
the business, the organization, the association moving forward.
Fantastic. And so I know, because you shared with me before a little bit of your story, is that at a time you were homeless yourself. Um, how do you see that experience or other experiences that you have gone through personally making you stand out in the field that you're in now? What kind of superpowers or special characteristics do you bring into this work in talking with people about whole health, mental health, physical health, that you feel are a differentiator for you when you're talking with teams about this kind of thing?
Well, I think it's important. When I was homeless, I did have a home. It was just the back seat of a car. Um, and but it was through a winter that was one of the coldest winters in Chicago. I didn't know that when it was occurring at that time. I found out about it years later when I was actually doing a presentation. And I figured if what I did when I was living in that car is I would drop my clothes off twice a week to a laundry. I would every morning I drive to a health club that only cost me at that time $20 a month. And I would work out. I would be able to shower, and I worked at a restaurant. And the restaurant I worked one shift, and I made sure in that one shift that I ate, and I also made sure I took something home with me. So what it is it's survival, it's inner strength, and it's to get people to see, no matter how low you may be, I mean, there is still sometimes something that can help you come back to life, to get that energy, to get past that next point in your life, to make a difference in your own life and also make a difference in others.
And in part of your work, Steve, do you also talk with people about around mindset? Because I'm hearing you even framing, well, I was not homeless. I had a home. I had a home in the back seat of my car. That's a very different concept than a lot of people would think in a situation like that, and would just call themselves flat out homeless. You said, you had the mindset to say, I had a place to live, and I also had a path. I had, a place to go and exercise and shower and a way to get food and all of these things. So is mindset something that you also help people with in your work?
I do. My mindset is very big. Sometimes you have to forget about tomorrow because the thing is, if you keep bringing negativity into your life, if you keep saying, you probably heard that phrase, don't think of a pink elephant, don't think of a pink elephant, don't think of a pink elephant. What do you think of? You think of a pink elephant. But the thing is, if you keep thinking about, I had this hardship before, I had this hardship before, and you're stuck in that, you need to move away from that. And in mindfulness, what you start thinking about is what's happening today and the steps that you're taking to move today, to move forward.
Fantastic. So tell me the exact moment that you realized that your story became your message, became your life's work. When did you realize that?
Actually, in 2020, and what had happened is I was asked for a local hospital to go do a wellness check on somebody who had a fever of 99.2, had some anxiety, was having trouble breathing. And it was February 2020. And I just said to the hospital, I said, well, why don't you bring her to the emergency room? And they said, well, our emergency room is pretty busy. Not knowing that there was a little virus going around then, because that was, so I went to her house and I asked her if I called her on the way over and I said, you're running a fever of 99.2. And she said, oh, well, no, I'm running a fever of 100.2. And I said, okay, well, 100.2 isn't bad. That's okay. That's just your body fighting over, fighting out, burning out whatever's there. And she said, well, Steve, I didn't say 100.2. And I said, what'd you say? She said, 102. I said, that's very different. 102. I said, I'll meet you at your front door. I'm not coming in your house because whatever you have is in your house. And it turned out that first day I went and I said to her, let's go and just take a walk in the front of your house and walk back inside. The second day I said, let's walk 2 houses and walk back inside. But we walked only half the length of her house. And she said, I can't breathe. I'm having trouble breathing. And I said to her, I said, have you lived here for long? She was 74 years old. She goes, yeah, I've lived here 50 years. And I said, oh, that main street out there, was it always that busy? She goes, no, it used to be a little side street. She goes, hardly any traffic. And then within about 15 minutes after talking, she said, Steve, you tricked me. I said, what do you mean? She goes, you had me talking about the road. I totally forgot about being short of breath. So we every day would walk 1 more block. And within 10 days, we walked a mile for somebody who was short of breath. And then I kind of like nudged her on the arm and I said, oh, so tomorrow we're going to run a mile, huh? And she said to me, she goes, Steve, I didn't know you run. And I said, oh, you know what? I don't. But we made the decision that we were going to run. And on March 10th, the day that they announced COVID, we ran our first mile.
Wow. How old was she? 80, 70?
She was 74. And people are like, oh, she didn't run a mile at 74. I said, I didn't say she ran a 2-minute mile.
But
I said, you walk approximately 15 miles an hour, most people. And I said, so,
yeah.
but we ran faster than the walk. I mean, we got back in 12.5 minutes. And we were running. We rode.
That's so good.
So it was at that point that I thought, you know what? I called her Carol. I called her Carol Cough More. Because Carol coughed more after we started working out, started to cough less. So that was my Carol Kaufman. And that was my first presentation that I started making to people that, you know what, 1 step at a time, you can make a change because within 2 weeks, you're running a mile.
And is this, I have to just kind of ask this bluntly, is this an area of like giftedness that you have to just understand these perspectives of, let me tell a story and take someone's mind off this. Let me switch mindset. Like, is this something that you learn, Steve, or is this a natural ability that you have?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. When I was young, my grandfather used to always say, you know what, pay attention to what everybody's saying. When someone's talking to you, pay attention to what they're saying. Hear what they're saying, because sometimes you're going to hear something that nobody else hears. There's going to be something that's going on that you're going to catch that no one else is. So I was doing that when I was young. Of course, it's my grandfather. I'm like, okay, old man, whatever. But I did do what he said because, I really honored him and I really loved him. And then I started noticing that going back to the lyrics in the song, people would talk about what was going on in their lives. And I was 6 years old when I wrote my first lyric for someone, not a song, but just a lyric for someone. And I handed it back to them and they're just like, that's exactly what I said. And it's because my grandfather said, listen to what people say, because what they say isn't always what they mean.
You may have a trait, something. So I took a study in a course called Human Design and found out that I have a reflector personality style. And I wonder if you do too, because that's not something that a lot of people possess, to be able to truly hear people and to be able to reflect that back to them. So that's a real gift. And I thank you for sharing that with me, because it's just as I've been hearing you talk, I understand a certain amount of training you've taken in nursing, and I think you are certified in hypnosis as well.
Right.
Yes. But then there just seems to be this innate piece of understanding that you have of dealing with people, and that's fantastic. Is there anything more about your work that you would like to share, in terms of, maybe some, just a tip people could take away about a one step that they could take, to help in their journey dealing with stress, dealing with mental health?
Right. Well, first of all, what I do is amazing and it's fun, only because there's something about seeing change, positive change in people. But the one thing that I would say is tonight before you go to bed, take something that you do not see as a positive and turn it, change it, write it. Before you go to bed, the last thing that you do when you go to sleep, right, is what you carry into sleep, what you work on. So during the day when you're multitasking, doing everything, you really never concentrate on one thing, but during the night, your mind then works on that one thing. So take that one thing. If, I'm not able to walk 1 mile, write down, tomorrow I'll walk 1 block. The next day I'll walk 2 blocks. So I would say just make one change. And if you can make one change, then you can build on that change for your next change, to your next change, to your next change. And it makes a difference. The only thing that never changes is when you do nothing. So the thing is, do something.
Absolutely. And that's a real, again, neuroscience, maybe something that your brain sticks on that thought that you have before you go to bed very differently than if you tell yourself a statement first thing in the morning and your mind is filled with all sorts of things. So I love that as well. That's a great tip for those who are listening in on this, whether it's live or whether you're watching the replay. Take a spin on something that's negative before you go to bed, turn it into something positive, and that will stay in your mind and actually, build that through your sleep. I know our mind is very active when we sleep, so that's wonderful information. So, that's such a great, I'm going to just say overview of everything that you do, because I know we could go in so much deeper. But now I'd like to, show the audience how, we've already talked a little bit about story. You've shared some stories, but I would love to just take a story from something in your life, not related to your work. So it could be a memory of childhood. It could be something that just happened to you last week. And we're going to turn that into a story that you can actually use to help people understand your work a little bit more. So could you share a story with us?
Sure. When I was young, my father was really a gruff man. He threatened more than he actually did, but threats are sometimes enough to make you be a certain way. And when I was young, I actually had somebody who sometimes would care for us when my parents would go out. And that person was really abusive to me. She would always say to me, Steve, you know what, if you tell your father that I'm abusive to you, I'm going to tell him that you touched me. And of course, that would have really set my father off. So I could do nothing during that time. And the first person that I talked to about it was a school counselor finally years later. And the school counselor said, Steve, that doesn't happen to boys. That happens to girls. And that sat with me for a long time thinking, you know what? Now, whenever people are telling me something, I really do have to make a determination. Is it real or is it not real? And then even if it's not real, to them it's real, so it's real. And that's my story from when I was younger. And that actually taught me a little bit more of the resilience from when I was homeless to moving on to, moving forward and keep moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, first of all, my, deep empathy, for that situation that you had to go through. I mean, both being fearful of your father and then also having an abusive caregiver, to make you feel even less safe. That's very vulnerable, and I appreciate you sharing that so candidly with me and with the audience. What I would suggest in terms of using that, in a story is, sharing an example with someone, if you're talking again at a corporate presentation, or if you're talking with a client one-on-one, to share. Sometimes when we're in a situation with our health, we have told ourselves a story for a long time, and we don't know how to change that story. And I can resonate with that because when I was a young child, I unfortunately went through this experience where I had a caregiver who was abusive towards me and threatened to tell my parents that if I shared that information with them, she would tell them a story about me that was untrue, that I was actually the one who was being abusive, that I had physically touched her. And what that did is that put a fear in me. It made me afraid of relationships. It made me not sure I could trust myself or trust even my parents. And that story in itself led me to make choices in my life. And you have done the same thing with your health, where you have decided it's okay to do something or not to do something or to ignore something. And until you can change that story and ask yourself, is this real? Or is this something someone else has told me or something I have told myself? Nothing is going to change in your health journey. And I'm here to actually help you through hypnosis, through mindset, through understanding and empathy of the situation that you're in, to actually help you find those patterns and see what's real and what's not real and show you the way towards health. So I hope that is helpful for you, something that you might be able to share. It's a tricky situation. That's certainly not a story you'd be able to just share with just anybody off the cuff. It could put some people in a position where they feel triggered and vulnerable themselves, maybe because of a similar instance. But again, it's a powerful story, and I would suggest that you do use that. It's again not something that you often think of a male child being exposed to. It's more often a young girl that we would think in these situations. But I think in any situation, whether it's healthcare or whether it's corporate, anybody can relate to a story like that where they don't feel safe, right? And we tell ourselves stories all the time to protect ourselves that aren't true. So I've appreciated so much sharing stories with you and hearing stories from you today, Steve. How would you encourage people to get in touch with you if they want to learn more about your work, or if they want to book you as a speaker to talk about mental health and whole health and how important that is in the workplace?
You can contact me at stevecohenspeaks.com. And on LinkedIn, I'm at Steve Cohen Speaks. And my company that I have is called MedVesta. Med's like medicine, vest like investing in something, VESTA, medvesta.com. And that just means that you're investing in your medical well-being. So that's MedVesta, hypnosis healthcare, but medvesta.com is also the best place.
Awesome. So medvesta.com or stevecohenspeaks.com.
Right.
Or Steve Cohen Speaks on social channels as well.
Right.
So thank you again so much for joining me today. Thank you to those of you who are listening live, to those of you who might be tuning in a little bit later. It was a pleasure to have you join us as well. And I just want to remind you how, we've seen witness today through Steve's stories, how stories really help to create meaningful connections in your work. There is science-backed data that shows that we create these neural pathways between the storyteller and the listener. But more than that, in your business, storytelling allows you to be authentic. It allows you to not have to worry about following social media trends, how to get away from that AI drivel that you see out there. Making stories that connect to purposeful messages give you a solid marketing plan every time. So whether you're online, on stage, or at networking, everywhere you are connecting with people, let story be your guide. Right. Reach out and learn how storytelling can help change your sales success. You can find a free story bio in my download that helps you get a little closer to what your story messaging might be. And I encourage you to continue digging into that I accidentally just muted my microphone. I hit my keyboard. Keep digging into your story all the time. Take some time at the end of this year to reflect on who you are and the value that you are to the world. Steve, thank you for your value and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
And I wish everyone a happy holiday.
Happy holiday, everyone.